Live, we're live.
I can't hear you guys.
We're not talking.
Oh, okay. Shit.
Morning, everybody. Welcome to the morning show. I'm your host, Leonard Duncan. Today we have Joe Tully from ATV On Demand and UTV On Demand, and Jeffrey Henson from Dirt Wheels or High Torque Publications, however you want to put it across there. Good morning, gentlemen. I got to go roll into my normal spiel for our sponsors. We need to thank GBC Tires for all of the support they give us. They've been with us as one of our very first sponsors, and they take such amazing care of us. So thank you very much, GBC and the whole crew over there. Elka Suspension, leading the industry in every category you can imagine. These guys are awesome. They build the best shocks in the industry, and you need to get some Elkas on your machine ASAP. We also have DBR Racing. They make many different components for various ATVs, from skid plates to ECU holders to air boxes to battery boxes. Check out DBR Racing. They make some really great stuff. Jeffrey Henson, hey, welcome to the show, man. It's your first time. And we had your partner, Kane Schmid, on last week. Just want to say thank you so much for spending the morning with us.
You're welcome. Glad to be here. Had to skip church to do this.
Well, I apologize for that, and we'll say a prayer
Good.
for you after we're over. Okay,
My wife went for me, so we're good.
that's good. That's good. Joe Tully, as always, thank you for spending the morning with us and gracing us with your time.
Oh, happy to be here. Yeah, the weather is gloomy today, so better to be inside.
Right. Yeah, we're not doing so good out here either. Well, today's episode is pick your ride, and I was talking with Joe yesterday, and he was telling me about a conversation he had with Ed Textera from Textera Tech. And I want Joe to elaborate a little bit on that conversation. And that's going to set the pattern for the beginning of our conversation. Joe, go ahead.
Oh, we were talking yesterday with, the KO that we just tested, and it's going to drop Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Go set a reminder for that. But we were talking about that and just production rules and what's production and what's not production in racing at this point. Is like Yamaha the only thing you can race. So conversation kind of went into hybrids and how if Yamaha pulls out, everybody's going to be building their own stuff. So then Ed just starts going down the rabbit hole while we're on the phone, and he's like, all right, let's see what a full rolling chassis costs. And of course, a rolling chassis is not a rolling chassis. It's a frame, A-arm, swing arm, linkage, and steering stem. So we jumped on Walsh's site because they're big into that. And the full chassis from Walsh was 10.5. And he's like, man, 10.5, that's a starting point. And ironically, that's the same price as a whole YFZ 450R. So we spent about an hour on the phone just looking up prices of parts, trying to build this thing out. And I'm sure we did not look up every nut and bolt. And we were kind of like, yeah, $500 miscellaneous hardware. But anyway, the build was going to come out to be somewhere in the neighborhood of around $30,000. Either buying a new CRF 450 to cannibalize the engine, or buying something, instead of spending 11 grand on a new Honda, buy one that's a couple years old for 8, save a few grand. But, either way you slice it, you're going to be close to $30,000 to build that bike that way, starting with a full aftermarket chassis. Yeah, it was interesting.
So that brings us into the conversation. Jeff will bring you up to speed here, because I know that you are deep into the ATV industry and love the sport as much as we do. So Joe and I have had multiple conversations about the best machine to buy as a used rider Whether it be a 400EX, a Blaster, the LT 230, whatever it is. That's more breaks down why we want to have the conversation about picking your ride, because there's no wrong answer. It's for you. If you enjoy it and you want to ride it, there you go. You want to build a hybrid quad, you want to build a more of a professional level machine out of what you have. The prices are up there, and you have to pay that price, or you're going to build junk. And I hate to say that, but there is a lot of parts out there that you can buy that are not up to snuff, that people buy every day. And I feel bad for them.
Yeah, I think a lot of people go headfirst into building a hybrid with a dirt bike engine and have no idea, what the lack of a counterbalancer does for vibration, or the gearing itself is not, it's set up for a dirt bike, not a 20-inch tire on an ATV. But there are ways to make that work.
Well, also when you talk to guys like Walsh and Baldwin and some of these other people that have dealt with a lot of these hybrids, they help their consumer with, setting the gearing. I know when I had Bo Barron on the podcast, he talked about how different, because he went right with his normal TRX 450R gearing, and that was wrong because it didn't work with the hybrid.
Yeah.
So when you look at the used market, we talked to Kane about this as well. When you look at the used market, where are you going to be directing your people to let them know, hey, these are the machines that are good. This is what they're good for. And we'll get into the entry level KO market and other quad market, later on in the show. But I mean, that's there are some entry level mid-size machines that are out there. They're just not from, they're not the key demographic coming from Japan. So
right. Yeah. I know Joe and I have talked about this extensively, and everybody we know in the industry loves the Yamaha Raptor 250, for an entry level or novice level machine. And even as a machine for somebody like me to ride, I've been out on the dunes, for a couple of days on a Raptor 250. It was equipped with GYTR and Nerf bars and stuff, paddle tires, and just had a blast on that machine. That's a great one to get started with, and one that you can grow with for sure.
What do you think the reason for Yamaha stopping to build that was?
I don't know. And I talk to their engineers out there in Georgia all the time, and they love that machine too. I mean, it comes back to the same old line we've been getting, where there's just not the market for it. And I don't believe that. You go to a works race and you still see those Raptor 250s all over in the kids classes. I think that's the same case back east. So I have no idea. It makes no sense.
Every Raptor 250 that I see for sale is snatched up instantaneously, and they're paying exorbitant prices for them. Even the race crowd pay more than the recreational guy, because the racers can't find them, and they got 3 kids or 2 kids racing, and the youngest one's still got to go through it, and the older one has worn out 2 of the Raptor 250s already.
Yeah.
We get Joe on a Raptor 250 and turn the governor in all the way in, because
slow it to a crawl, walk behind him with the tether cord, kill switch.
Yes.
I'll just leave it in first.
There you go.
And I said this last night because Jeff and I talk all the time, and I'll just throw it out here since I told him I trademarked it. I'll just say it first. That way nobody else can steal it from me.
Meaning me.
The Raptor 250, if you look back at ATV racing history, the ATVs had a boom in the 80s, and that the TRX 250R wound up carrying racing, for grown-ups at the ATV Nationals throughout the late 80s and a lot of the 90s, until even they were doing hybrid versions with dirt bikes in the late 90s, around the time that the 400EX hit. or shortly thereafter. And, that 250R carried the sport, let's just say 10 years. And the Raptor 250 is like the Honda 250R for youth racing. It really is, because it's a bike. It was only made a few years. It handles well. It's very light, and that's, I think, one reason why we don't see the 300EX out there in youth racing as much as the Raptor, because you can get more horsepower, I believe, out of that 300EX engine. You can a Raptor 250, but the Raptor 250 is a 60-pound lighter bike. And the handling and the lightweight, I think that's the reason you see what's happening with the prices. Is it is as desirable for a 14, 13-year-old racing in cross country as a 250R was to a grown-up back in the 90s.
Let me ask you guys a question, and then I'll give you each a chance to answer this. And Joe, we've been over this 1,000 times, so you're going to sigh when I ask it. So the government has came in and put regulations on age on these machines. Why didn't they consider size and weight instead of age? Because there are a lot of 10, 11, 12-year-olds that are big enough to ride your 250, no problem. I understand the smaller framed children, but come on, you're destroying these kids' youth by not allowing them to ride these machines or forcing them to go ride dirt bikes. Go ahead, Jeff.
I don't have a good answer for you. I completely get it. And it's just a topic that I'm very cautious in what I have to say about that stuff. I think you're right. There's some kids that just, grow faster than others that are perfectly well fit for those machines. Maybe they're looking at, just mental skills and, being able to react quicker and stuff. I have no idea. I mean, that all just comes down to lawyers and the manufacturers doing everything they can to keep themselves out of, being liable for injuries or whatever. Unfortunately, I think off-roaders, our worst enemy tends to be ourselves, and especially if you just have to go to YouTube and see, there's a lot of parents out there putting their kids on full-size machines that weigh, 800 pounds or more. The kids are so small, they can barely reach the handlebars, much less turn the handlebars. And, if you're going to do that, that's fine, but quit putting that stuff up on YouTube, online, because groups like the CPSC, I know you don't like to talk about them, Lenny, but
they're evil pieces.
They pay. There's people out there, they actually have jobs with them, and all they do is monitor sites for stuff. I actually got into a big conversation with them about whether or not three-wheelers are banned or are they not banned. It was so unclear there for a while. But I learned a lot about the CPSC and how they told me, they pay a ton of people to monitor, the websites. They look at Dirt Wheels Mag all the time. They get our magazines. They're watching Joe and stuff. They're watching all of you that manufacture parts for ATVs and stuff to make sure that what's being produced is not what's the word they use? Well, it's not banned or has anything to do with three-wheelers. That became a big issue. So
if I tell
I hear what you're saying, but it's just hard for me to really comment on that. And,
is that
there are plenty,
I want to be clear. Is that because of where you work and the guidelines in that factor, just because of
no, it really isn't. I just don't want to say anything that's going to bring more harm to off-roaders. There are plenty of kids out there that are very talented, great riders, have natural ability that they could be riding a little bigger machine than what the government says they are there's where their skill level is at, but it's a hot topic. And because I deal with the manufacturers all the time, I don't want to say anything that's going to get them in hot water either. I understand what you're saying. I'm going to go meet with one of them today, in fact. So yeah, I don't want to hear about, why did you say that, Jeff? So,
because you guys got no spine.
yeah.
I don't have an affiliation with any factory, probably never will, because I'm not going to hold my tongue. I mean, I'm just so sick to death of all this crap.
Yeah.
We're supposed to live in a free country, and obviously we don't. And until we fight back, we'll always be ruled. Joe, it's your turn, bud.
Well, I don't think it's a problem with the manufacturers. I think the people, some of the people, especially if you look at a company like Yamaha, those guys they're not just there to do a job. Like, those guys are real enthusiasts. And I can't speak for what they want. Obviously, I think what they want is whatever is, best for selling ATVs and for people who want to buy ATVs. So I don't think our problem is the manufacturers. I think the problem that we have is that you have a small group of people within the government that cannot possibly be an expert on everything that people do in this country for recreation, entertainment products. And they're making the decisions on what is safe and makes sense for all these different things that they inherently really don't know or don't care anything about. And that's why I think they've shifted from a displacement size limiting what kids ride to a speed limit on what kids ride more than displacement, because they have a 14 and under class now that's limited to under 35 miles per hour. Don't hold me to that. It might be 30. I believe it's 35. But these are slightly bigger machines. Obviously, I think most serious off-roaders that have experience would agree, we should be putting riders on bikes more on a scale of rider size than speed. And obviously we don't want to put kids on something that's ridiculously overpowered, but when it comes to ATVs and operating them safely, it's, do you have the body mass and the body size to properly control the vehicle? That's what's most paramount. So I think if people who were actual ATV enthusiasts were in charge of setting up the age requirements for different machines, it would be based more on vehicle fit than engine size or speed.
Yeah, I know. I get really frustrated, and I apologize to anybody listening that I just get sick to death of the regulations. I'm just tired of it.
Yeah. I think the whole size issue comes down to, then you're going to have salespeople at, dealerships walking around with measuring tapes, I have to measure, and it just opens up too many loopholes that the government is not comfortable with, because they, lose some control, even though we're the ones paying their salaries. They just, I think that they're just looking for the simplest way for them to tell us what to do. So I agree. It's sad that it works that way.
And the only reason that I think fitment makes the most sense is because it's proven. It's proven every day in any good bicycle shop around the country.
Yep. And you can take your bicycle over 30 miles an hour very easily. So,
but they fit you to the bike. They make sure you have the right reach, the right standover height, all of the things that you have to have physically for, in physical scale to control a bike that's set up, with wide handlebars or narrow handlebars or long reach or short reach. Fitment works. But again, the manufacturers aren't the problem. It's people in the government that aren't enthusiasts making decisions about a topic that they know very little about.
Education, and there's very few people in the government that are educated about any of the things they're making rules and laws about. We can get into multiple different off-topic conversations about that, but I want to keep it back to where we started about picking your ride, and I'm going to pin this one on you at first, Jeff, because I already know where Joe's going to go, and I think you do too. If you were going to lay out your, let's say, 5 quads that people should look for in the used market, where would you direct them first, and what would you tell them are some of the things they could look for on these machines?
We're talking about sport quads.
Yes.
Uh,
Are there any other quads?
no, there are, but I came up through the whole sport quad scene, so I would definitely.
4x4 quads are pretty badass, though.
Well, yeah, I especially those GNCC guys that run the 4x4 Pro class. Those guys are my idols. That is just insane. 90 horsepower, 800-pound machine whipping through the trees like they do. Those are my heroes.
Have you ever watched those videos?
Yeah, when they like coming whipping out of the woods, the back end is all over the place. They're completely off the ground. It's insane. People have no idea how much of a man you got to be to handle a machine like that in tight quarters.
Since I started dealing with Cody Collier, the 2-time, I've been watching his videos, and Brandon Frazier and Landon Wolf, and these guys. I mean, we're off topic again, but watching them 4-wheel drift through the woods, and have that thing totally under control, as heavy as it is, they float through the bumps. I mean, these are big, heavy race cars that these guys ride instead of drive. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And some of them I know for a while there, the preferred model I think was the 850. Some of them were racing the 1000R. Of course, the 850. Well, the 850 Scrambler is still around the Polaris side, but yeah, everybody's racing the Can-Ams, and yeah, so they're all kind of having to race the 1000cc ones now. It's a handful of a machine, but a great ATV. That would be one of my on the 4x4 side. I'm going to pick those sport 4x4s every time. But on the sport quads, I mean, if you want to buy a used machine, definitely 400EX, the Z400, 2 great machines. Z400 is liquid cool. Both of those incredibly reliable, fun to ride, easy for newer riders, novice riders to come into. That you can learn to shift with them. They have clutch. Great performance no matter where you're riding at, whether it's in the woods or out in the dunes. Even somebody that's an experienced rider can have a great time in the dunes on one of those machines. The other one, 450R, for sure, Honda. For more experienced riders, and the YFZ 450R, you got to get Yamaha in there because they're the only ones that have stuck with it this long. One of my favorites, just for all around riding that you can ride all day long, be super comfortable on, whether it's in the dunes, woods, trails, out in the desert, is the Raptor 700R. So was that 5 there?
You haven't even went off into the 2-stroke market.
Well, I just bought one too. I used to race an 87 250R. I just bought another 87. I'm going to be talking to Lauren, I think tomorrow, about bringing that engine in. We'll talk about what we want to do with it. I love the 250R. Who doesn't love the 250R? My first ATV was a Banshee, and I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. I came over from dirt bikes, rode up my buddy his 87 Banshee, and was just hooked on that power when it kicked in. Went out the next week and bought myself a Banshee. 89 at the time, had the J arms on it. Love the Banshee and stuff, but the 250R is the ultimate quad. It's the one that everybody else is imitated over the years when sport quads were more plentiful from all of the manufacturers. So yeah, can't say enough good things about the 250R. The only reason I didn't bring that up is because it's I think it's getting harder and harder to find parts, but I keep on hearing about more aftermarket companies that are machining and manufacturing those hard to find parts.
On a TRX,
and I also know
on a TRX 250R, you can build the entire machine, all but one part aftermarket.
What's that one part?
The CDI.
Oh, well, we can find those. We can turn to China to find that. No, just kidding.
I have a box full of those China ones that don't work.
Yeah. Okay. So the 250R just went to the top of my list. There you go. For experienced riders, it's funny because I know you guys are busier than you can keep up with. and other companies. I did a shop tour out at Lone Star Racing, and they cannot keep up with demand on parts for sport quads that are no longer around anymore, including the 250R. Tons of 250R stuff. I talked to my buddy Jonathan McVeigh, who's in sales over there, and as we were walking through, I saw axle carriers, axles, swing arms. They still manufacture full frames. And he said, yeah, he said, every one of these is spoken for. We can't keep up with demand. We've got a waiting list on this stuff. And I just saw, just stacks and stacks, which I had no idea. It really gave me, it made me feel really good after doing that, knowing that there is still that much demand for the vintage stuff that we all love. So, yeah, there you go. 250R, number one.
Joe, let's hear it.
All right, you already know. First, let me represent for all the other poor kids in the hood. So I'm going to start off with my budget picks. And I'm planning on doing a video, something like this. And these weren't the 5 bikes that were necessarily in the video, because I talked to you and a lot of other people and kind of polling the community as to what were the top 5 best used sport ATV buys. So maybe when I run out of stuff to do, I'll do that video. But seat of the pants, if you want to buy something, let's just say under $2,000, realistically, and not you found a barn find that you got this unbelievable deal. No, I'm talking like real deals you can get on Marketplace right now, and you will find this most likely under $2,000. My second pick would be maybe like an old LT230. We have one we bought it for testing because we want to do a classics review on one, because it came out the same year as the LT250 starting in 85. They changed a little bit through the years, turned into Quad Sport LT250 that was still a 4-stroke. I believe that model went through 90. So 85 through 90, there's LT230s, LT250s. You can find these things in decent running condition all day long for like $1,500. Second choice for a budget bike would be the Blaster. Obviously, the last couple model years had disc brakes. They had more of that bird look to them with a pointy beak nose. That's better if you can get them because they were hydraulic disc brakes. I believe it was the same brakes that came off the Raptor 660. What's good about the Blaster is you can find a good one for $1,500 to $2,000. I saw one the other day for $1,750, an early 2000s model that's had the stock tires. So that bike is in good condition. And there's a ton of aftermarket for that bike. If you want to just buy something cheap and quiet, sounds like a leaf blower, stock Blaster. Throw a pipe on it, it's a little ripper. You can get long travel suspension for them still. You could build a full race bike out of a Blaster today if you wanted to. Cheap fun. Mid-price, I'm probably going to go, since I can only pick one, I'll go with the 400EX. Z400's a little faster. Especially if you add parts to it, but they seem to be selling at a little higher price. I think the guy who's buying a 400 is more interested in just a reliable trail machine than building a full-on race bike. There was a ton of the 400 sold. Whatever parts you can't get from Honda, if you go to an aftermarket salvage yard like Power Sports Nation, they can typically find used parts in good condition. Honda sold 1 billion of those things. Then on the higher end, a little higher budget, high performance for my last two, I'm just going to stick with the YFC 450R and the Raptor 700R because there's parts. Any part you want for either of those two bikes, you can go get it at your dealer. They're all available, no problem. And the Raptor's been made since 2006. So again, there's 1 billion of those things on the of those units on the market. You can find one at a pretty reasonable price.
I agree with all of those picks from both of you. I'm worried about the 400EX because of the difficulty in finding good transmission components. That's something that's a problem. with a lot of this stuff is finding the parts to keep them running correctly.
If I could add one caveat to the 400EX purchase, if you're actually thinking about buying a 400EX, my advice, and you might disagree, but if they say it has a big bore kit, just walk away. Just don't buy something with a 440 kit or a 416 kit. If they tell you that it's a stock engine and it's never been gone into and it still runs good, that's probably a better choice, because mechanics that don't know what they're doing tend to over tighten the head studs. And if it's got a big bore, there's just a chance that that's happened. So stick with a stock engine if you can find one.
It's not a bad lead on that machine. There's so many, we're going to have to do a show on the things that you need to do to, when you buy a new machine, to cover yourself. And that still doesn't mean that you're not going to buy one that has some issues. So the 400EX, that's what worries me on that model. I'd still go and buy a Banshee, even though that actually, if you think about it, some of the pieces for Banshees are starting to get hard to find. You can't buy center cases anymore. Somebody may come up with them billet. I haven't seen them yet, but that doesn't mean they won't come. With the modern suspension upgrades that we have for the Banshee, man, they have become a plusher ride. The power delivery can be changed and moved around. So somebody that doesn't want that just snap shrill that a Banshee has, you can get them some roll-on throttle power. LT500s are great machines, but they're really hard to find parts for. We're searching all the time because we have so many in the slots to build. Use 250R three-wheelers, man, they're not cheap, but great machines.
There's some sellers. There's some sellers out there that are very proud of their Banshees with the way they. I see $15,000 Banshees all the time, and it's just a stock machine in mint condition. I think maybe they were getting that back during COVID, but things have calmed down a little bit now. But yeah, finding a Banshee for a reasonable price, that's going to be really hard.
Yeah, I agree. A clapped out Banshee is $6,000 all day long on Marketplace.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that all stems from the COVID, but not to be arrogant, we're dropping $30,000 Banshee builds all day long.
Yeah. It's funny to hear people complain.
And they're more than that, really.
Even back in the 80s and 90s when we were racing our 250Rs and stuff, we, dropped, just on the build alone, we were putting 15 grand into those machines to race them. And to see people today complain about, if somebody did come back with a sport quad, say one of the Japanese manufacturers, and we'll say, that it would start around $13,000, and they're like, no, what? No, that's, not going to, well, that's what it's going to take for a manufacturer, if they decide that there is the market for it there. That's what it's probably going to cost.
But again, yeah. Jeff's talking about a race bike. We're not talking about if Honda re-released the 400EX with fuel injection pretty much as it was when they discontinued it. For 13 grand, you're talking about a brand new.
I'm talking about a 450.
Yeah, you're talking about a race bike.
Yeah, I'm actually basing that price on what one of the Japanese manufacturers, I had a discussion with him at length. And just a general 450 from way back in the day, and say with EFI and, with the some upgrades for today. But yeah, they were talking $13,000, which I don't know how you compete with the YFZ 450R at that point when they're still selling those for what, under 11. So, did I go off topic?
No, you didn't, but I just got some really disturbing news. And I'll just put it out there now. We'll put it out later in other deals. Anybody that knows the Stevens family from JSR, send them their thoughts and prayers. They're going through something that none of us would ever want to deal with. And I know it's a little sobering and changing the conversation, but send some prayers their way for JSR Racing Products. They're great people, and they definitely don't deserve what just happened to their family. So thoughts and prayers. It's not my place to pass on any other information. So if you would send that information out as much as you guys can, I'd appreciate that. And anybody else out there, just please think about these people. Everybody in our industry is a family, and whether they're wearing your banner or not, you know what, you need to think about them as human beings and care about them, because we're a small industry, and believe it or not, we're really all a family. And because it's us against everybody out there trying to defeat the ATV world. So that being said, no, Jeff, you weren't off topic. It was you were great. I like the back and forth on all of that information. I missed a little bit by the information that I just received, and I apologize for that. But where we go from here with your aftermarket stuff, like I was just saying before you took over, is we need to have a show talking about what to look for on these machines as far as excess of wear. Was it used for this? Was it used for that? And I wouldn't tell people not to buy something that was raced. Sometimes the right people that have raced these machines have done the maintenance and done the rebuilding and done the things that are necessary to keep this machine in top-notch shape. It's not like when people were buying race bikes in the 80s and they were just flat destroyed. Maintenance schedules and information that companies give out for people have changed in such a way that the maintenance on these machines is way better.
Yeah.
You agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I would say even racers typically, when I was racing all the time, we changed our oil after every race, every 3 rides. We changed it more often than it needed to be changed. Every time I do an oil change, I'd be like, why did I change this? Because it's still coming out fairly clear. So racers do tend to take better care of their equipment. They have to depend on that to get them to the finish line. So yeah, I think there is a definitely that's good info right there. Yeah, don't pass on a race machine just because it's a race machine.
Right. I mean, you can look at it and find the defects in them. Rattle can covers a lot of stuff, and you can tell when something's been rattle canned, and look for that. Also, the bottom of the frame, the side cases. There's some dune machines that all the paint's gone on the bottom of the frame, but it's not dented, which is not a bad sign. The gouges in the mag cover and the clutch cover from the boots, that's something to look at, that can tell.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, this 250R that I just bought, and I'll tell you what, I paid $4,500 for it. It's complete.
You go to jail for stealing that.
Yeah. Well, that was all I wanted, was a very good frame and a good engine. This engine has hardly any boot scuffs on it. Super nice. Great compression. The chain guard guide and everything is still there. The holes aren't broken out and anything. And the frame itself, there's no welds. It isn't broken, and it's got very little pitting to it. So when I saw this, I got it from Dave Wiley. He was selling it for a friend of ours, Tommy Harris. And when I saw that, I was like, I can't pass on this. So yeah, I jumped all over it. Excited to have a 250R again.
That being said, we give a huge shout out to Dave Wiley at AETC Addiction, because the guy buys and sells a tremendous amount of machines. I think this year he's bought 2 from me that were in the loop. I was just the guy standing there and just passed on the photos because, you'd be amazed all the machines that come through that people want to sell, and I just send photos to the potential people that I think can buy them, and most of them sell. There's a few that don't, but most of them do sell.
Yeah, Dave's got some great history over there at his shop, and he's got anywhere from 80 to 120 machines at any given time. But it's not just two-stroke quads and stuff. It's, he's got a couple of, I think he's got one of Jimmy White's old Ducatis that he raced over there. He's got I can't remember who it races. He's got a Ducati that sleeved down to a 200, from that is exactly how it was left after three-wheeler racing kind of came to a halt there for a little bit. Yeah, just incredible history. He's my go-to guy for anything vintage. Vintage story.
Have you ever seen the factory Honda two-stroke 200?
No.
Have you, Joe?
I've seen pictures of it, but I haven't seen it in person.
Yeah, well, I got to talk to Stevie Wright. He'll be on the show next Tuesday at 5:00 Pacific Standard Time, and on ATV-TALK. He's been kind of ducking me for almost 3 years, but with this three-wheeler story that we did in Arizona last month, which will be coming out this month, he contacted me. He came in studio. We talked for a little over an hour. I'll get him back, but he talked about that factory 200 two-stroke that he rode. Wasn't the D-sleeve 250R. This was a machine that was built in Japan and brought over, and that's what he raced. He had 4 different units, and nothing like anything that we saw in the normal production range. The carrier system was totally different. It was a really cool bike. I think that the future of three-wheelers, the way this industry changed after 1985, you would have seen a lot of really cool high-tech stuff come through Honda and bringing itself into the three-wheeler, four-wheeler industry. Would have been awesome.
Yeah.
I think they
the whole three-wheeler thing too, it kind of comes back to what we were talking to earlier about youth model ATVs. There are guys out there that can, Dave Wiley, Dave Ham, all those guys love riding those three-wheelers better than two-wheelers, better than four-wheelers. That's just the machine that fits them. It's in their DNA. And it's too bad that, there are people out there, that the three-wheelers got a bad rap. And I think even the government in its investigations back then straight up said they didn't find any fault with the machine. It came down to, people just riding them irresponsibly, I think was more than anything. But it sucks because you got these people that can handle these machines. They were made for these machines, and they get screwed because, everybody can't ride them the way that they do. So I was sorry to see that go. It's great to see it coming back, that
it is coming back.
Yeah.
I don't believe you're allowed to make a production three-wheeler, but you can make parts for somebody to build their own three-wheeler.
For racing. Yeah, definitely.
Well, whatever. I mean, they're going to do, if they take it to the racetrack and ride it around the track once.
Not supposed to talk about that.
Anybody that's stupid enough to believe that there's not a loophole in everything, there is.
Yeah, exactly.
I think, what I would have loved for Joe to came out for that day. I think he really would have enjoyed himself with the different three-wheelers and the four-strokes, the 2 aftermarket four-strokes, the Yamaha and the Honda. Those machines were super comfortable to ride.
Yeah.
A lot of fun.
I've ridden Dave Ham's three-wheeler, and I didn't come up with three-wheelers. They're foreign to me, really, as far as riding goes. I was always two wheels to ATVs, but I was amazed at how soft it was, but it felt incredibly stable, easy to ride, and I was comfortable immediately on it, even at speed. So
Wrangle's Yamaha, and they're made by 2 different people with 2 totally different theories, and they're such a similar ride.
Yeah.
Unreal. Yeah, we won't even talk about that one two-stroke that I rode that was unbelievably horrible. But it's not horrible because it was a two-stroke. It was just horrible because they put it together wrong.
Yeah.
Just totally not the way to do it. But that's neither here nor there.
Oh, are you talking? Okay. Yeah.
I told you all about it, didn't I, Joe?
Lenny just peed in somebody's Wheaties.
I didn't.
Well,
know.
let me just which one? What color was it?
It was black and yellow.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. I get it.
I felt bad for Dave Wiley after I wrote it because he didn't build it, but he owns it, and he wasn't unhappy with my interpretation, but man, that poor machine got destroyed in any review that I gave it.
Yeah, it's a little scarred up underneath for sure.
You know what? I didn't bottom it out. I don't think. Not
it sits low.
Yeah, it does, and it doesn't turn the way they say it does. It just doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
That riding that machine, I never should have rode it first. It damn near ruined me for the whole day because I do have that shoulder problem, and it aggravated my shoulder so bad that I freaking almost didn't ride any other bikes.
Yeah.
I was fortunate to go. You know what bike was really cool to ride was that 350X.
Yeah.
You ever got to ride, Joe? You ever got to ride one of those?
I own one.
And how often do you get to go ride it?
Oh, we dust it off once every 3 or 4 years and start it.
It started.
Was that was Dave's, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Dave Wiley's 350. Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe.
No, we filmed it. We filmed that bike a few years ago. We did a stock test on it, and then we did a full build on it, frame up build, and recently took it up to Briarcliff with John Pellin when we filmed this 200X project that we started about 8 years ago. I figured since we were going to go shoot the 200, we should take the 350 up and kind of run them head to head and see which one is faster, since we had a fully built 200 and a pretty much fully built 350. So yeah, the 350X is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I did tell Jeff that I'd be more than glad to tune the machine for him if he would ever set it up so that we could go ride somewhere together, because that's what it was lacking, was tuning. It just
engine tuning or suspension tuning.
Engine tuning. It didn't track the same as the bigger four strokes. It was a little more darty. It was also set up narrower.
Did it have a stock swing arm on it?
Yes.
I think they're very short. My buddy Al over at CT says I just need to firm up the rear shock. It just seems like it's a short wheelbase bike. I know that when I ride it, it seems like it always wants to pick up the front wheel coming out of corners. If you don't get it to break loose very quickly, it'll start pushing because it wants to lift the front end.
It's a skill set thing.
Yeah, I think it's personal preference, really. I know Dave races that one with Works every once in a while too, and there are guys out there that prefer the 350X over the 250R as far as rideability goes.
Yeah, I mean, I would be, if I was going to go into that environment and race, if I couldn't build a hybrid, I'd probably pick the 350, just the way it is, change the tires around, make sure it's got a good axle in it, and go ride it. Yeah. I mean, I think the coolest pipes that were made for them in the era, weren't they Bassani's?
I don't know.
What was that?
I was going to say, we'll take your word for it.
Oh, wow.
We'll have to get Dave Wiley in here on this. I think he's got a few of those pipes hanging at it. He's got everything in that shop, but
I know we used to buy Bassani pipes and modify them instead of manufacturing our own back in the day. And my dad would modify the pipes because, you figure my dad's been doing it so long. He came from the era when they built their own exhaust pipes, because there were, very few manufacturers, and the costs were so high that, you know, you got to figure the era and time. You know, we come from a time when everything is accessible. Back then it wasn't accessible, and my dad would build all the pipes himself, you know, whether it be for the old XR75s or some of the Triumphs and BSAs that he used to ride. So we had the front row seat to seeing some of that stuff done, but we didn't have the manufacturing ability to make our own stuff, so we would just buy Bassanis and modify them. It was great. Sold a lot of DG pipes back in the day for a while, for 50 yards. Bassani also made a pretty smooth riding pipe for the 83, 84 ATC 250R. That wasn't a bad pipe. It wasn't a great, oh my God, horsepower pipe, but it wasn't too loud, and it made a pretty smooth, easy to ride power.
I just remember everybody running Super Trap, you know, exhaust on the back of their old 4-strokes and stuff. I can't remember when they came into the whole scene.
That era too. We just chose the Bassani because it made more power.
Yeah.
And the Super Trap you could tune because it had the wafer system. And gosh darn, we're so far off topic now. But the Super Trap you could tune with the wafers. The more wafers you put in there, the louder it got, the more power it made, allowed more exhaust out. You quiet it down by taking wafers out. And I mean, it wasn't a bad system. A lot of them, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, were slip-ons. So stock header, which as the evolution of the sport goes, the header makes just as much power as the tail. So, you know, that kind of hurt him a little bit, where Bassani made a complete exhaust. So there were some others, you know, I think even back then, Curtis wasn't making his stuff. I think he was running somebody else's stuff at the time. So I don't remember when Curtis started making pipes exactly. It wasn't something that I followed, but, you know, it did happen.
Yeah.
Joe, you're so quiet today. What's going on?
Yeah, that's odd.
I'm just letting you roll on 3-wheeler pipes.
Well, I didn't mean for it to go there, but, you know, I just remember, God, I was a teenager then. It was a long time ago, guys. Long time ago. How prevalent, I want to ask both of you guys this, the Z400. We don't see as many of them in our world anymore. How prevalent are parts availability? And they must be a pretty reliable machine if not as many people are rebuilding them.
Jeff, do you want to go first?
Oh, I was going to let Joe. I've been talking. I was going to let you go first.
Joe, go ahead.
You know, we did some looking at this last year, and it seemed like the Suzuki parts availability, and I could be wrong, feel free to verify, but we did a little look up on a few Suzuki parts, and it seemed like supply was still there for the Z400. So I don't know if Suzuki's having the same parts availability issues that Honda's having with the 400EX. You might be able to find more parts for one of those Zs. The bike is overlooked, I think, a lot. They don't sell incredibly cheap, though. Like, their asking price isn't very low. It's just in a weird spot. It's a great bike if you can find one at the right price. When they went to fuel injected, the handling arguably got a little better. The suspension, and I'd say the looks definitely got better. The ergonomics got a little better. The suspension went a little bit backwards when they went to fuel injection, if you're in the market for a used one. Reason being is that it just got stiffer. We felt like the Gen 1 Z400s, when they were still carbureted, especially, you know, after they added the reservoirs to the front shocks, that 400 had probably some of the best suspension in the 450 class for trail riding. It was better than most of the 450s if you wanted a woods bike. And so, that's what I've got. As far as hop-up stuff goes, pipes, things like that, there's probably going to be a little bit more as far as exhausts for the Gen 1 Suzuki than the fuel-injected bikes, but they're still out there. I mean, it's a good bike. The biggest thing that ever needed fixed on that bike, in my opinion, was just the swing arm. It needed a round housing like the Honda.
And the frame was better. Jeff, how about you?
I think, I think so too. I think parts are still readily available, and I just don't think, it's not, there weren't as many produced as say the 400EX, but the Z400 is a great machine. I remember going to the Press Intro. I think it was when they changed the look of it and everything. It was out there in California near Oceanside. Getting to ride that machine, and it was just so easy to throw around in the air, in the corners, everything else. It's a great machine. It's liquid cooled. I think it's near as reliable, if not as reliable, as a 400EX. So I'd love to own one.
I got to go to a viewing in 2002 before it came out, and they had it covered so we couldn't see. There was no name of manufacturer, and they had them up on, they had two of them up on stands, and we could walk around and look at them and look at everything, and all of the hardware, the tires, the hardware, everything was 400EX. The shock bolts were all 400EX. And I told the guy, I says, well, that's 400EX hardware. This is 400EX. This is 400. This is all the same as a Honda 400EX. And I started pouring it out, and I go, is this a new Honda? And the guy freaking just looked away, like, no. But they got a little perturbed when I kept pointing out all the Honda parts on it, But at the end of the deal, they unveiled us a LTZ 400 and a KFX 400.
Yeah.
And the geometry between the Z400 and the 400EX is actually pretty similar. From what I've heard, the A arms almost swap.
Yeah, I don't know. I never tried that, but if you go back and look at the very first version that came out, most of the stuff looked like it came right off the Honda shelf and went right on that Suzuki. The shocks, the front shocks, the original front shocks looked like 400EX shocks. I mean, so much of it was so close to 400EX. I don't think they didn't let us look at the swing arm. It was covered up because that was the Suzuki tell.
Yeah, that was a good call. They're like, we don't want you to see this part.
Yeah, they didn't let us look at that. The way they had them set up, you could only see the front of the machine and each side, a little bit. I don't even think they let you see all the controls, because looking at the controls would give it away as well that it was a Suzuki model. But they knew what to cover up to keep the brand hidden until they were ready to reveal. But I only got to go to a couple viewings like that where you got to see machines before. One of the coolest deals was putting a YFZ 450 up on a stand and having Yamaha walk in, and there's 5 or 6 people that speak Japanese and one guy that speaks English, and my brother and I just walked around and pointed at things and would explain what we liked and didn't like, and the guy would translate for him, and we stayed there a couple hours and then left. Those days are over. I think, they have enough quality people like at Yamaha that have been around ATVs long enough that they're building really good ATVs. I mean, that YFC 450R is it's a good bike, and it's a really good
Yeah, I know all of the engineers that work out there in Georgia at Yamaha are hardcore enthusiasts of sport ATVs. So they have a lot of input on what went into what you see today. So yeah, you got the right people, definitely.
Yeah. Listening to some of the things that have gone on with Honda over the last couple years, their dirt bike program is better because of the Lawrence brothers. Bo Barron, being on the podcast, was talking about his machine, and he goes, I bought a Honda because it's gonna last for years. It's durable, it's strong, it does all this stuff. And he says, but I rode a Kawasaki and it handled better.
Yeah.
But it's not gonna live. I was just thinking when we were talking earlier about, I asked you guys your models, and I think a model that you guys might have missed is the KFX 700 V twin. That machine, ultra durable. I know it's big and heavy, but it handles great, turns great, easy to ride.
I used to have this guy in the work series back in 04 that raced one of those, and he was always holding us up in the tighter sections of the course.
I was never holding anybody up. I was out front, and I was out front most of the time.
You're right. I had to, I got to throw those digs in there.
Right.
I think that bike was a good idea. All right. Sorry. I love Kawasaki. Sorry, guys. I think it was a great idea. I think it was poorly executed. I think there were some mistakes made. I had two of those bikes through the years in for evaluation. We tested, and, the swing arm was so short. That was a big problem, and it was shaft drive. So, you couldn't just change tire size and re-gear it. It was a wheelie machine. It was so easy to wheelie that thing. And we spend so much time with vehicles, maybe even more time, we would have got more comfortable. But, seat of the pants in the times that we rode it, it's like, we just wanted more swing arm. We wanted a little longer swing arm, make the front end stay a little bit more planted. Back here in the East, we've got a lot of steep climbs with very little run. So you need a back end to hold that front end down. And that bike was very light in the front end. I think Kawasaki should have left front wheel drive on it and built it as a sport 4x4. I think they could have been ahead of their time on that one, or put a regular swing arm on it with chain and sprockets. I mean, I can get past the CVT, but just give us a swing arm so we can change swing arm lengths and re-gear.
I don't totally disagree with that. I spent a lot of time on that machine, and once you learn how to ride it, I think it was because you didn't ride that shaft drive 700 like a normal sport ATV. One thing is you never get out and you never let off the throttle. You may back out of it slightly, but you never shut off. Because as soon as you would shut off, the engine braking was so bad it'd throw you over the front of the bars. But if you stayed in the power all the time, it responded 1,000% different. Where a lot of people with your chain driven machines will chop the throttle and then snap it back on and get the response they're looking for. With that machine, you couldn't ride it that way because it would not function. So I got to race that for a full season, a little more than a full season, because we did a bunch of testing with the Kawasaki before 04 when I raced it. When I went to the 05 and rode the 450 Honda, that made me so much faster on that sport quad. You can't believe the lessons that it taught you for when you charge whoops, when you do all these things, because with that 700, if you backed out of it one time, you're on your lid. And So when you transition to a 450R Honda, I could instantly go faster than I normally would have went if I would have spent all that time on a 450 Honda.
I mean, heck yeah, Lenny. I mean, if you go out and race all the time underpowered and then all of a sudden you have a race motor, you're going to be way faster. I mean, it's the same thing with handling. You go out and practice all the time on an ill handling ATV and overcome it, and then you hop on a real race bike. Heck yeah, you're going to be faster.
I thought that 700 handled really well. I really enjoyed that machine. I did. I mean, they gave me the opportunity to ride it again in 05, and unfortunately it didn't work for the company. So I went to the 450 Honda. I went to the 450R Honda, but it's a better bike than most people think. It does take a little time to get used to because it is not your traditional chain driven machine that accelerates a certain way. So that's just my take on it. I know
it was definitely fun. I'll say that it was definitely fun to ride.
And if you take somebody who doesn't know how to ride and you drop it into drive and send them on their way, and then drop it into reverse when they get in an area they want to back up and they back out of it, and it just my take on it, But
I got nothing.
you never ridden one?
I have, yeah, but not like you did back in the day. You always shocked us at how quick you were on that thing, especially, on those races that we did back then when Works went to Texas and Colorado. Those were some tight courses, and you were surprisingly fast on that pig. So we were all on our 450s.
Hey, the greatest thing was, you remember Texas, the start, and it was the long rolling start. And before you get to the first turn, there was a jump. And as you come over the jump, all you see is Kawasaki, because the team Kawasaki guys were right there. And I hole shotted the race, and I come over that thing first, and all the Kawasaki guys are on the fence because they knew what it was. They knew the sound.
Yeah.
And all excited and cheering and everything. That was probably a highlight in my career, being able to press that rise. And we were still racing with 250Rs and Z400s and 400EXs, and I mean there was just a wide variety of machines racing at that time.
Yeah, Wiley was out there on a gas. Like I think the 300 he had out there for that race. I have a picture of him in a big water puddle, just steam coming off of this thing.
Hey guys, I want to say thank you so much for joining me on the morning show. You're always welcome, Joe. I know you've been on multiple times. Jeff, I'm assuming that we can form a relationship to have you come on as often as you're able to.
Sure.
We'll talk more ATVs. I'd really like to get a what to look for episode going, from your opinion and Joe's opinion, and set a date when we could sit down and have that show and all of us talk about the things that the consumer should look for when they're buying a used machine or even some new machines.
Yeah. Problem areas and all that. Absolutely.
What do you think, Joe?
No, I think it's a good topic. I have buddies that drag me to go look at used bike buys, and I've bought a number of used bikes. So I can't say I'm an expert on every model, but I can definitely hit with some broad brush ideas.
That would be great. Again, gentlemen, I appreciate you guys coming on the show and all your enthusiasm and input in the industry. We really appreciate it. Without Dirt Wheels, without ATV on Demand, UTV on Demand, we couldn't be growing. And I think the industry is growing because I was just at a dealership that had more youth machines than anything.
Yeah.
And that excited me. So we'll leave it at that, and we'll hopefully catch you guys on the next one.
You got it. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks, Joe. Have a great day.
Good seeing you, Jeff.
Okay,
You
we'll talk
too.
to you later. Have a great one.